Tylea's Troubles, Part 9. Brute Strength. A Battle Report. Summer 2401. The city of Revola, northern Tilea. There was precious little time to prepare, certainly insufficient to gain help from the north by sending a plea through the pass. Those knights who had ridden south to offer Terme Castle relief had arrived only to see the brutish foe clambering over the walls and dragging their ladders up behind them. After then witnessing the death in single combat of the brave paladin Sir Gregoire de Vienne, they were left stuck outside the castle, entirely unable to help, as the awful slaughter began within. Now they had returned to the city of Ravola, and although the foe, busy with looting, was not exactly hot on their heels, it was obvious to all that they would come, and soon. Even ogres would know that the horribly successful surprise attack on the southern fortress would be wasted if they did not march on to catch the city just as ill-prepared. So it was that Lord Giacomo ordered all those who dwelt in the hovels and cottages outside the walls to hurry into the city for their own safety. This they did willingly, until the land outside lay silent. The grey stone city walls were studded with towers, built in a variety of styles, the result of more than 150 years of piecemeal extensions and improvements. The gate was a small keep in itself, with a more massive tower to its west. Upon that bigger edifice was mounted the only working war engine currently in Ravola's possession. The almost forgotten engine had been carried in pieces from a storehouse no one had ever really thought it would ever be removed from, and hastily rebuilt. The floor beneath it was strengthened from below to take the new weight resting upon it, and hopefully to withstand the stresses and strains caused by the engine's working. Large chunks of masonry were hoisted up to provide ammunition, while the last surviving man in the city to have helped work it many years before imparted what advice he could to the serfs who were to crew it. No one, not even the most vainly chivalrous of the knights, complained about its use, for the foe were vicious thugs, with not so much as a speck of honour, and fully deserved just such a death. In truth, the noble knights wished there were more such engines, and indeed Lord Giacomo ordered several workshops to begin fashioning copies with all haste. The new engines were never to be completed, however, as the ogres, who were soon sated with their bloody ransacking of Terme, came thumping into view, their iron-shod boots tearing up the ground as they advanced almost as quickly as any destrier. They were not numerous, but such hulking brutes did not need to be. Led by the tyrant Razger Boulderguts, 2 regiments marched through the abandoned hamlet to the south, their banners of bones and battle trophies creating a clattering cacophony of noise to accompany their fiendish bellowing. The order given by Lord Giacomo satisfied some and surprised the rest. He decided his realm's knightly warriors should not man the walls, but would instead sally forth to meet the foe in the field before them. In his hurried speech, he asked his knights why they possessed such fine mounts, if not to use them in the fight. Why possess such horsemanship and skill in arms, if not to employ them? And would not the lady bless them all the more, if instead of cowering behind the walls to let arrows and stones do the killing, they rode gallantly and bravely to face the foe in battle? Last, he held aloft his lance and spoke most lyrically of its virtues, describing how such a weapon, deftly and solidly placed by a man of both courage and well-honed skills, could surely skewer even a beast twice the size of an ogre. This last remark was met with the loudest cheer, as all the knights hefted their own lances in agreement. And so, after dutifully praying to the lady that she might bless them, 3 companies of knights rode through the gate and arrayed themselves in the shadow of the walls. Lord Giacomo, riding a horse barded in heavy black cloth, a large purple panache adorning his helm, and a heavy scarlet cloak to mark him out, rode with 5 knights, the survivors of those who had fought against him all those years ago in the tourney in which he had won the realm. To his left rode his knights errant, ordered to stay close, all the better to receive Lord Giacomo's shouted commands. Off to the right rode the largest of his companies, his knights of the realm. The noble paladin, Sir Galwin, carried Ravola's standard, with its black bull's head and argent and sable stripes. Above the knights, upon the walls, were 20 longbowmen and a company of men-at-arms, as well as the lone trebuchet, all of whom watched with trepidatious fascination as the armoured riders manoeuvred into position and began dressing their ranks. Before long, the attention of both those upon and below the walls was caught by something else, revealing the trial was about to begin. The brutes, bellowing, suddenly surged, and the attackers came on. The 2 regiments of bulls moved together on the flank of the hamlet, the tyrant Boulderguts raising his huge cleaver-like sword aloft, its blade still besmeared with blood from the garrison at Terme and the brave Sir Gregoire. The only other ogres present, a brace of lead-belchers with their heavy burdens, moved up on the other side of the hamlet to release a thunderous blast of iron and lead, with no noticeable result. It was a disappointment mirrored by the magics summoned by the limping slaughtermaster, who also failed to harm the knights. More than one of Giacomo's knights began to believe the lady had truly blessed them, and so gained a confidence they had not truly possessed before, despite their cheers. Lord Giacomo dipped his lance to signal his command, guiding his own company and the young knights on his left to wheel a little and trot leisurely towards the main bodies of the foe. His intention was to hit the ogres to the flank and front with a synchronized assault from all 3 companies of knights, if, that is, all went well. But the plan went awry almost immediately. The oblique advance of the knights errant had put their flank within sight of the 2 cannon-carrying ogres. Considering their cannons were now empty, the 2 ogres now attempted to charge. Left to their own devices, the young knights would most certainly have preferred to stand rather than flee from such a base foe, but Lord Giacomo did not intend to waste their lives, and so with another gesture of his lance he ordered them to run. He knew this would hinder his plans somewhat, yet hoped it would not do so irretrievably. The knights errant would surely reform beneath the walls, while the lead-belchers would be drawn within range of his many longbows. Then, if a little later than he intended, the young knights could come up and join the fray. The young knights obeyed, and came thundering on to the rear of Lord Giacomo's company, doing so in a manner that appeared so much like a charge that the men-at-arms upon the wall looked down in utter confusion. The brute tyrant Boulderguts, however, barely noticed. His attention had been entirely upon the foe before him, then only distracted by the faltering advance of his other regiment of bulls, who had at first seemed intent upon charging Lord Giacomo's company, but for some reason had failed to do so. Unhappy at their hesitation, he simply marched his own regiment calmly towards the foe, bawling, "March on, lads! Let 'em charge as if they dare! Their wooden sticks'll splinter and snap! Their bones'll break as we bash in their iron plates! You'll be sucking the marrow for breakfast!" Perhaps the slaughtermaster was not convinced by his master's speech, or possibly he thought to make sure it came true. Either way, while the tyrant shouted his boasts, the magic-wielding ogre summoned up a magical fortitude and stubbornness to bolster the bull's already considerable natural strength. Boulderguts' bravado was rewarded by the charges he desired, while Sir Galwin's knights-errant smashed into the tyrant's own regiment. Lord Giacomo led his smaller company into the slaughtermaster's regiment. Disappointingly, the trebuchet had so far been incapable of landing anything near to the foe. One of the 2 large companies of longbowmen, who had been placed upon a wall from which their arrows could not reach the foe, had been making their way out of the gate so that they could lend their own bloody contribution to the fight. Upon witnessing the knights' brave charges, they joined those among the other company of longbowmen, still on the walls who could see, to loose a hail of 30 arrows at the lead-belchers. One of the brutes, his grey skin fatally pierced from head to foot by arrowheads, wailed pathetically and collapsed to the ground. His comrade, keen not to suffer a similar torment, turned and ran. As the lead-belcher thrashed about in an ever-increasing puddle of blood, his weakening wail was outmatched by the sound of maniacal laughter. Razger Boulderguts had cut a paladin in two, and found the sight of the horse, carrying a pair of disembodied, stirruped legs, very amusing. Despite this horror, the other knights managed to wound the slaughtermaster and fell an ogre, losing two of their own number. For a moment, some amongst them believed the foe was about to break, and entertained a brief glimmer of hope that the impact of their charges at full charge had indeed discomfited the foe, just as Lord Giacomo had promised. It was not to be, however, for the brute stood firm, and the fight went on. Lord Giacomo threw himself even more enthusiastically at the foe, becoming entangled in a one-on-one fight against a hulking bruiser. While he and his brute foe hacked at each other, Giacomo's armour becoming bent, battered and bloody, 4 of his knights fell to the enemy's battle-standard-bearer, who waded through them, swinging his blade as if he were merely scything hay and not steel-clad men. The last knight was cut down by the other ogres, so that all of a sudden Lord Giacomo found that he faced the enemy alone. Facing such odds, and filled with despair at the swift slaughter of the men he loved, all the bravery Giacomo had ever known was insufficient to the trial he now faced. He pulled on his reins, turning to flee, intent on the mad desire to apologise to the people of Revola for what he had done, only to be cut down and trampled into the dirt as the bulls hurtled onwards. Most of the ogres failed to notice his demise, nor gave any heed to stepping on him and his horse to move forwards. Upon seeing what lay before them, the ogres happily turned their rush into a charge and crashed headlong into the stunned young knights beneath the walls. The knights fighting Boulderguts and his regiment put up a better fight, yet they too were doomed. 2 by 2, then 1 by 1, they fell, until only madness kept them fighting. When at last reduced to 1 man, being the paladin carrying the standard of Ravola, even madness was not enough to keep him there. Like his lord and master only a few moments before, he turned and fled. And like Giacomo, he too was run down and ground into the mud by iron-shod feet. Cruelly, the knights errant were easily swept aside, their short lives ending in a combat lasting barely more than a few moments. The victorious ogres strode over their corpses and right up to the walls. They still had the ladders they had used at Terme. What happened next was something like what had happened at the castle, although here there were no knights advancing at their rear, so they could take their time. When they did climb, the men on the wall stood no chance at all, something the ogres knew from the start, and the men, even the slowest-witted amongst them, knew from the moment they saw the first ogre pluck a defender from the wall and toss him down to his death below. Screams echoed in the streets, mingled with coarse voices crying, "Give it here!" and "Smash it down!" and "Where do you think you're going, you little rat runt?" Misery and pain became the order of the day, and by nightfall Revola had well and truly fallen. Never mind a castle, Razger Boulderguts had now captured no less than a city.